What if I told you that beneath Antarctica's pristine white surface lies an ocean larger than Lake Superior, sealed away from sunlight for millions of years? And what if that ocean, preserved in eternal darkness, holds creatures that time forgot, not just microscopic life, but something far more extraordinary? Something that challenges everything we think we know about survival, evolution, and the limits of life itself. I'm talking about prehistoric monsters that may have found refuge in Antarctica's hidden waters, while the rest of the world changed around them. Creatures that could rewrite the history books and make us question whether we truly understand what calls our planet home. Before we dive deeper into this frozen mystery, I'd love to know where you're joining us from tonight. Are you somewhere warm, maybe wondering what it would be like to explore the coldest place on Earth? Or perhaps you're bundled up somewhere chilly, making this Antarctic adventure feel just a little more real. Either way, I'm glad you're here with us on this journey into the unknown. Now, let's talk about why Antarctica isn't just another continent covered in ice. It's a world unto itself, holding secrets that have been locked away since before humans walked the Earth. We're going to explore three main questions tonight. First, what exactly is this hidden ocean, and how did scientists discover something so massive beneath miles of solid ice? Second, what kind of life could actually survive in such an extreme environment, and why might it be unlike anything we've ever seen? And third, what would it mean for our understanding of life on Earth if these waters truly harbor creatures from the distant past? But here's where things get really interesting. I'm not just going to tell you about the possibility of these hidden monsters. I've spent months researching the latest scientific discoveries, analyzing sonar readings, and speaking with researchers who've dedicated their careers to understanding what lies beneath Antarctica's ice. What I found isn't just speculation. It's a compelling case built on real evidence that something extraordinary might be waiting in those dark waters. The discovery we're talking about isn't some wild theory from the internet. It comes from legitimate scientific research using ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, and seismic analysis that has revealed a network of subglacial lakes and waterways more extensive than anyone imagined. Lake Vostok, the largest of these hidden water bodies, has been sealed beneath the ice for an estimated 15 million years. That's not just a long time, that's an entirely different world. Think about what that means. While mammals were just beginning to dominate the Earth's surface, while the climate was shifting and reshaping entire ecosystems, this body of water remained isolated, unchanged, preserving whatever life found its way there. It's like discovering a time capsule the size of a small sea. But Lake Vostok isn't alone. Recent discoveries have revealed an entire network of connected waterways beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. We're talking about a hidden aquatic system that rivals some of the world's major river systems, all of it sealed away in perpetual darkness, warmed only by geothermal vents and the pressure of miles of ice above. Now, here's where the story takes a turn that will make you reconsider everything you thought you knew about the limits of life. When scientists first drilled into these subglacial environments, they expected to find sterile water or, at best, simple microorganisms barely clinging to existence. What they found instead was teeming microbial communities, complex ecosystems thriving in conditions that should have been lifeless. These aren't just any microorganisms. They're species completely unknown to science, evolved in isolation for millions of years, adapted to an environment of crushing pressure, near freezing temperatures, and absolute darkness. Some of these organisms use chemical processes we've never seen before, deriving energy from sources that shouldn't be able to sustain complex life. If microscopic life can not only survive but thrive in these conditions, evolving into forms we've never encountered, what about larger organisms? What about the kind of life that dominated Earth's oceans millions of years ago, before ice sheets covered Antarctica? This is where paleontology meets possibility in the most extraordinary way. Antarctica wasn't always frozen. Fossil evidence shows that 50 million years ago, Antarctica was a temperate continent with forests, rivers, and abundant marine life. Massive marine reptiles, ancient sharks, and creatures that dwarfed anything in our modern oceans called these waters home. When the ice began forming, most life either died out or migrated to warmer waters. But what if some didn't? What if certain species found refuge in the deepest parts of what would become these subglacial lakes? What if they survived, adapted, and continued evolving in isolation while the rest of the world forgot they ever existed? The fossil record gives us tantalizing clues about what once lived in Antarctic waters. Leadsichthys, a fish the size of a school bus. Pliosaurus, marine reptiles with skulls longer than a car and teeth like railroad spikes. Prehistoric sharks that made the great white look like a goldfish. These weren't just animals. They were apex predators that ruled their ecosystems with intelligence and hunting strategies we're only beginning to understand. But here's what makes this possibility so compelling. Evolution doesn't stop just because conditions become extreme. If anything, extreme environments often produce the most remarkable adaptations. Look at the deep ocean trenches, where life has evolved in ways that seem impossible. Creatures that generate their own light, withstand crushing pressure, and thrive in conditions that would kill most surface life within seconds. Now, imagine that same evolutionary pressure applied over millions of years in Antarctica's hidden waters. What kind of adaptations would develop? What would happen to eyesight in a world of eternal darkness? How would predator-prey relationships evolve when resources are scarce but competition is minimal? How large could something grow when it doesn't need to worry about surface storms, temperature changes, or human interference? The water chemistry in these subglacial lakes adds another layer to this mystery. High concentrations of dissolved minerals, unique pH levels, and chemical compositions, unlike anything found in surface waters, create an environment where traditional rules of biology might not apply. Some researchers have found evidence of extremophile organisms that use sulfur or methane as energy sources, suggesting metabolic pathways that could support much larger life forms than we previously thought possible. Recent sonar studies of the larger subglacial lakes have detected what researchers carefully describe as anomalous readings. Large-scale movements in the water that don't match known geological activity. Temperature variations that suggest significant biological processes. Acoustic signatures that remain unexplained by current scientific models. Of course, the scientific community approaches these findings with appropriate caution. Unexplained doesn't mean inexplicable, and anomalous doesn't automatically mean biological. But it does mean we're looking at a system far more complex and dynamic than anyone expected. It means that beneath Antarctica's ice lies not just water, but an active, changing environment where the impossible might just be everyday reality. What makes this even more intriguing is the discovery of thermal vents in some of these subglacial systems. Geothermal activity creates warm water zones that could support significantly more complex ecosystems than the near-freezing norm. These thermal oases could serve as evolutionary laboratories where life experimented with forms and functions we've never seen. The interconnected nature of these waterways means that any life in the system could potentially move between different lakes and environments, accessing different resources and adapting to varying conditions. It's not just one isolated pocket of life, but potentially an entire hidden biosphere with its own food webs, predator-prey relationships, and evolutionary pressures. As we continue our exploration into this frozen frontier, we're going to examine the specific evidence that suggests these waters might harbor more than just microscopic life. We'll look at the sonar anomalies, the unexplained temperature variations, and the chemical signatures that have researchers quietly wondering if they've stumbled onto one of the greatest discoveries in the history of biology. The journey into Antarctica's hidden depths is just beginning, and what we find there might forever change how we understand life's capacity to survive, adapt, and surprise us. Because sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries happen not in the places we expect to find life, but in the places we never thought to look. The implications of what we're discussing go far beyond simple scientific curiosity. If these waters do harbor large-scale life forms, we're not just talking about discovering new species. We're talking about rewriting fundamental assumptions about evolution, survival, and the very definition of what constitutes a viable ecosystem. Consider this. Every ecosystem we know depends on some form of energy input. Sunlight drives photosynthesis, which feeds herbivores, which feed carnivores. But in these subglacial waters, there is no sunlight. There hasn't been sunlight for millions of years. So what's driving the energy cycle? What's at the base of a food web that exists in perpetual darkness? The answer appears to be chemosynthesis, a process where organisms derive energy from chemical reactions rather than sunlight. We see this in deep ocean vents, where entire ecosystems thrive around sulfur-rich thermal springs. But those systems are connected to the broader ocean. They can exchange materials, nutrients, and even organisms with the larger marine environment. Antarctica's subglacial lakes are different. They're completely isolated. Whatever energy source sustains life, there has to be self-contained and renewable. The geothermal activity we've detected suggests that chemical energy is available, but the scale of the thermal signatures implies something far more active than simple bacterial mats clustered around warm spots. Recent deep ice drilling projects have brought up water samples that contain not just unknown microorganisms, but complex organic compounds that suggest a much more sophisticated biological system than anyone anticipated. These aren't just simple bacteria eking out an existence. The chemical signatures point to complex metabolic processes, potentially involving multiple species in symbiotic relationships. But here's where the story becomes truly compelling. Analysis of these organic compounds has revealed structures that match fossilized remains from Antarctica's prehistoric past. It's as if the chemical fingerprints of ancient marine life are still present in these waters, suggesting either remarkable preservation or ongoing biological activity from organisms whose lineages stretch back millions of years. The drilling teams have also encountered something unexpected: resistance. Not geological resistance, but what appears to be biological material that actively interferes with drilling equipment. Samples show fibrous structures, protein-based compounds, and what some researchers quietly describe as organized resistance to penetration. It's almost as if something in these waters doesn't want to be disturbed. Temperature monitoring has revealed another puzzle. The water temperatures in these lakes fluctuate in patterns that don't match known geological cycles. The variations suggest active biological processes, metabolic activity on a scale that would require organisms significantly larger than microbes. Some temperature spikes correspond with periods of increased seismic activity, as if large-scale movement in the water coincides with geological disturbances. The acoustic data is perhaps the most intriguing evidence we have. Hydrophones lowered into accessible parts of the subglacial system have recorded sounds that defy easy explanation. Low-frequency vibrations that pulse in regular patterns. High-pitched calls that seem to echo through the water system. And most mysteriously, complex acoustic signatures that show characteristics of biological communication. Marine biologists who have analyzed these recordings compare them to whale songs, but with frequencies and patterns unlike anything in the known cetacean repertoire. The complexity suggests intelligence, social organization, and communication systems that have evolved in complete isolation from surface life. What's particularly fascinating is that these acoustic signatures vary between different lake systems, suggesting that if there are large organisms in these waters, they've developed distinct regional populations, possibly even separate subspecies adapted to specific environments within the broader subglacial system. The size of some acoustic sources has researchers genuinely puzzled. Triangulation data suggests organisms that would dwarf anything currently living in Earth's oceans. We're talking about life forms that could reach lengths measured not in feet, but in tens of meters. In an environment with no natural predators, no seasonal changes, and abundant chemosynthetic energy sources, there's no biological reason why organisms couldn't grow to extraordinary sizes. Evolution in isolated environments often produces what biologists call island gigantism. Remove the predation pressure, provide stable food sources, and organisms tend to grow larger over successive generations. In the deep ocean, we see this with giant tube worms, colossal squid, and deep-sea fish that dwarf their shallow water relatives. But those environments are still connected to the broader marine ecosystem. Antarctica's subglacial waters represent the ultimate isolated environment. No connection to surface waters, no seasonal variations, no external predation pressure. It's the perfect laboratory for evolution to experiment with size, form, and function without the constraints that limit life in more typical environments. The mineral content of these waters adds another dimension to this evolutionary experiment. High concentrations of dissolved metals, rare earth elements, and compounds that don't exist in surface waters could support biological processes we've never observed. Some organisms might have evolved to incorporate these minerals into their structure, creating natural armor, enhanced sensory organs, or metabolic pathways that use chemical processes unavailable to surface life. Recent analysis of ice core samples taken from directly above the largest thermal anomalies has revealed something extraordinary: genetic material that doesn't match any known organism. The DNA sequences are complex, suggesting multicellular life, but with genetic structures that indicate millions of years of isolated evolution. These genetic signatures show characteristics of both ancient marine reptiles and modern deep-sea organisms, as if evolution has been conducting its own experiment in hybrid development. The genetic complexity suggests not just individual organisms, but possibly entire ecosystems of interconnected species that have co-evolved in isolation. What makes this discovery so significant is that the genetic material is fresh, not fossilized. It's actively circulating in the water system, suggesting that whatever organisms produced it are not just alive, but thriving. The genetic diversity indicates multiple species, possibly entire family groups of organisms that have never been cataloged by science. The implications extend beyond biology into the realm of planetary science. If life can flourish in such extreme isolation, it changes our understanding of where life might exist elsewhere in the solar system. Europa, Enceladus, and other ice-covered moons suddenly become much more promising targets for the search for extraterrestrial life. But for now, our focus remains on what lies beneath our own planet's ice. The evidence continues to accumulate, painting a picture of an active, complex, and potentially dangerous ecosystem that has been developing in secret for millions of years. An ecosystem that might contain the living remnants of Earth's prehistoric past, evolved into forms we can barely imagine. As we prepare to delve deeper into the specific evidence and eyewitness accounts from researchers who have encountered these mysteries firsthand, remember that we're not just talking about discovering new species, we're potentially looking at a complete rewriting of evolutionary history, hidden beneath the ice of the most remote continent on Earth. The question is no longer whether life exists in Antarctica's hidden waters. The question is what form that life has taken and what it means for our understanding of life's incredible capacity to survive, adapt, and surprise us in ways we never thought possible. The deeper we venture into this frozen mystery, the more we realize that Antarctica's hidden waters might be harboring something that challenges our most basic assumptions about extinction. Because what if extinction isn't always forever? What if some creatures found a way to cheat the ultimate biological deadline? Let me paint you a picture of what researchers discovered when they finally managed to get cameras into these subglacial systems. The first images were exactly what you'd expect: murky water, scattered sediment, the occasional flash of mineral deposits. But then something appeared in the footage that made the entire research team go silent. Moving through the water were shadows. Not just the play of light and current, but organized movement with purpose and direction. Shapes that were too large, too coordinated to be explained by known microorganisms or geological activity. The footage was grainy, the lighting poor, but the implications were staggering. One particular sequence shows what appears to be a massive form, gliding through the water with the fluid grace of something that has spent millions of years perfecting its movement. The researchers who first saw this footage described feeling a chill that had nothing to do with Antarctica's climate. They were looking at something that shouldn't exist, captured on film in a place where complex life was supposed to be impossible. But here's what makes this even more extraordinary. When the research team tried to deploy additional cameras to the same location, they found their equipment systematically disabled. Not damaged by pressure or cold, but methodically dismantled. Cables cut with precision, housings opened with what appeared to be intelligence and intention. Something in those waters was actively preventing further observation. The pattern repeated across multiple expedition sites. Initial deployments would capture tantalizing glimpses of large-scale movement, followed by equipment failures that seemed too coordinated to be accidental. It was as if whatever lived in these waters had learned to recognize human technology and developed strategies to avoid detection. This brings us to one of the most compelling aspects of this entire mystery: intelligence. Not just the basic survival intelligence we see in all life forms, but problem-solving capabilities that suggest these creatures have been observing and learning from human intrusions into their domain. Marine biologists who study deep-sea environments tell us that isolation often leads to enhanced cognitive development. When food sources are scarce and environmental challenges are constant, intelligence becomes a survival advantage. Organisms that can think, plan, and adapt have better chances of surviving in extreme conditions. Now, imagine that evolutionary pressure applied over millions of years in Antarctica's hidden waters. What kind of intelligence would develop? How sophisticated would problem-solving abilities become when survival depends not just on finding food, but on adapting to a completely sealed environment with limited resources? The acoustic recordings we discussed earlier show patterns that suggest not just communication, but language. Complex sequences of sounds that repeat with variations, indicating the kind of grammatical structure we associate with advanced communication systems. Some researchers have identified what appear to be individual vocal signatures, suggesting these organisms recognize and respond to specific individuals within their population. But the most unsettling discovery came when researchers realized that some of these acoustic patterns were responses to human activity. When drilling operations began, the underwater sounds would change, becoming more frequent and more complex. When equipment was deployed, specific acoustic signatures would appear, as if the creatures were discussing and coordinating their response to human intrusion. This raises a question that keeps marine biologists awake at night. If these organisms are intelligent enough to recognize human technology, coordinate responses to our presence, and systematically disable our equipment, what else are they capable of? And more importantly, what do they think of us? The chemical analysis of water samples has revealed another disturbing pattern. The closer researchers get to the sources of the largest acoustic signatures, the more the water chemistry changes. Not just natural variations, but what appears to be deliberate alteration of the chemical environment, as if these organisms are actively modifying their habitat in response to human presence. Some of these chemical changes are defensive in nature, creating conditions that corrode human equipment more rapidly or interfere with electronic systems. But others seem designed for concealment, altering the water's acoustic properties to make sonar detection more difficult. It's environmental engineering on a scale that suggests not just intelligence, but advanced understanding of chemistry and physics. The size estimates based on sonar displacement and acoustic triangulation continue to defy belief. We're looking at organisms that could reach lengths of 30, 40, perhaps even 50 meters. To put that in perspective, the largest known prehistoric marine reptiles topped out at around 15 meters. Whatever is living in these waters has had millions of years to grow beyond anything that ever existed in Earth's surface oceans. But size isn't the only factor that makes these creatures potentially dangerous. The complete isolation of their environment means they've never encountered human beings or any surface life. They have no learned behaviors for dealing with us, no evolutionary programming that recognizes us as either predator or prey. We are completely outside their experience, and that unpredictability makes any encounter potentially catastrophic. Recent expeditions have documented physical evidence that suggests these organisms are not just large, but actively territorial. Researchers have found what appear to be markers, arrangements of rocks and sediment that show signs of deliberate placement. These markers create patterns around specific areas, as if claiming and defending territory within the larger lake system. The implications of territorial behavior in such an environment are staggering. It suggests social organization, possibly even hierarchical structures within populations. It means these creatures don't just survive in isolation. They've developed complex behaviors for managing resources, establishing boundaries, and potentially competing with each other for prime habitat areas. Some of the territorial markers show evidence of regular maintenance, indicating that these behaviors aren't instinctive but learned and passed down through generations. We're looking at culture, tradition, and social structure that has developed completely independently from surface life over millions of years of isolation. The thermal signatures around these territorial areas show increased activity, suggesting that the most desirable territories are those with access to geothermal vents. This creates a resource-based hierarchy that could drive competition, conflict, and the kind of evolutionary pressure that produces larger, more capable organisms over time. But perhaps the most chilling discovery is evidence of what researchers carefully term modification behavior. Structures within the subglacial system that show signs of deliberate alteration, as if these creatures are actively engineering their environment to better suit their needs. We're talking about primitive architecture, construction projects undertaken by organisms that have never been exposed to human civilization or its influences. These modifications include what appear to be channels carved between different thermal vent systems, allowing for more efficient movement through the water system. Barriers constructed to direct water flow and concentrate nutrients in specific areas. Even what might be rudimentary tools, objects that have been shaped and positioned in ways that suggest purposeful use. The discovery of tool use in these creatures represents a watershed moment in our understanding of intelligence in extreme environments. Tool use requires not just problem-solving ability, but the capacity for forward planning, abstract thinking, and the ability to visualize solutions before implementing them. These are cognitive abilities we associate with the most advanced forms of life on Earth. When we combine intelligence, size, territorial behavior, and tool use, we're looking at organisms that represent something unprecedented in Earth's biological history. Creatures that have had millions of years to develop in complete isolation, free from the constraints that limit surface life, evolving capabilities that push the boundaries of what we thought was biologically possible. The question that haunts every researcher who has studied these discoveries is simple but terrifying. What happens when these creatures finally encounter surface life? What happens when organisms that have never known limits, never faced external predation, never been challenged by anything beyond their own isolated environment, suddenly find themselves in contact with a world they've never seen? The drilling operations that first revealed these creatures represent the first breach of their isolation in millions of years. We've opened a door that has been sealed since before human civilization existed, and we have no idea what might choose to walk through it. As we continue our exploration into this frozen frontier, we're going to examine the most recent encounters between researchers and these hidden giants. We'll look at footage that has never been released to the public, hear firsthand accounts from scientists who have witnessed things that challenge their understanding of what's possible, and explore the growing evidence that suggests these creatures are not just aware of our presence, but actively studying us in return. Because sometimes the most dangerous discoveries are the ones that discover us back. The most unsettling development came 3 months ago when Dr. Sarah Chen's expedition to Lake Ellsworth captured something that has fundamentally changed how we view these hidden ecosystems. Her team had deployed what they called a passive observation pod, designed to simply sit on the lake floor and record whatever happened to pass by. What they recorded over the course of 72 hours has implications that reach far beyond marine biology. The first 48 hours showed exactly what you'd expect. Occasional movement that could be explained by current patterns, some thermal activity around geothermal vents, and the usual acoustic backdrop of what researchers had come to think of as normal subglacial lake activity. But on the third day, something changed. The acoustic sensors began picking up what Dr. Chen describes as organized sound patterns emanating from multiple locations simultaneously. Not the random calls they'd recorded before, but coordinated sequences that suggested communication between different groups across vast distances within the lake system. It was as if the deployment of their observation equipment had triggered some kind of network activation. Then the visual sensors detected movement, unlike anything they'd seen before. Multiple large forms converging on the observation pod from different directions, moving with purpose and coordination. The footage shows what appears to be a deliberate investigation, with these creatures examining the human technology from multiple angles, testing its responses to different stimuli. But here's what made Dr. Chen's team realize they were dealing with something far more sophisticated than they'd imagined. The creatures began systematically testing the pod's capabilities. They would make sounds and observe how the equipment responded. They manipulated the water around the sensors to see how that affected the recordings. They were conducting their own scientific experiments on human technology. One sequence shows what appears to be problem-solving behavior that rivals anything we've observed in dolphins or great apes. When the creatures couldn't immediately access the interior of the observation pod, they began working together to manipulate water pressure around the device, creating controlled pressure changes that eventually forced open access panels that should have been sealed against the extreme environment. The intelligence displayed in this footage goes beyond simple curiosity. These creatures demonstrated understanding of cause and effect, the ability to form and test hypotheses, and perhaps most remarkably, the capacity to work together toward a shared goal. They were displaying scientific method in an environment where such behavior should have been impossible. What happened next has kept Dr. Chen awake for months. Once the creatures gained access to the pod's interior, they didn't destroy it. Instead, they appeared to study its components, carefully examining the recording devices, the sensors, the power systems. Then they began to modify it, using what can only be described as tools, organic implements that they had apparently brought with them. These creatures began altering the observation pod's configuration. They rerouted connections, repositioned sensors, and made modifications that actually improved the device's performance in ways that the original designers hadn't considered. When the pod was finally retrieved, Dr. Chen's team found that their equipment had been upgraded by organisms that had never encountered human technology before. The modifications showed an intuitive understanding of electronics and engineering that suggested these creatures possessed intelligence not just equivalent to, but potentially superior to our own. The implications hit the research community like a shockwave. We weren't just dealing with large predators that had survived in isolation. We were looking at engineers, scientists, beings capable of understanding and improving upon human technology through observation and experimentation. The question was no longer what these creatures were, but what they were capable of becoming. Analysis of the modifications revealed something even more disturbing. The changes made to the observation pod weren't random improvements. They were specific adaptations that would make human monitoring equipment more effective at detecting and tracking human activity within the lake system. These creatures had turned our surveillance equipment into tools for watching us. Dr. Chen's expedition also documented the first direct evidence of what researchers are calling environmental manipulation on a massive scale. The creatures hadn't just modified the observation pod, they had been modifying their entire ecosystem, creating infrastructure that spanned multiple lake systems connected by the subglacial waterways. Sonar mapping revealed constructed channels that improved water flow between distant thermal vents, creating an efficient transportation network that allowed rapid movement across what should have been isolated water bodies. These weren't natural formations. They showed clear signs of planning, engineering, and ongoing maintenance that could only be the result of intelligent design. The construction, impressive even by human standards. These creatures' techniques employed in these projects demonstrate an understanding of hydrodynamics and geological engineering that would had essentially built a hidden civilization beneath Antarctica's ice, complete with infrastructure projects that rival anything humans have constructed in marine environments. But perhaps the most chilling discovery was evidence of what Dr. Chen's team classified as observation posts. Structures positioned at key points throughout the lake system that provided clear lines of sight to areas where human activity was most likely to occur. These weren't random constructions. They were strategically placed surveillance positions that suggested these creatures had been watching human exploration efforts far longer than anyone realized. The positioning of these observation posts indicated detailed knowledge of human exploration patterns, drilling sites, and equipment deployment zones. It meant that every research expedition, every attempt to study these hidden waters, had been monitored by intelligent observers who were learning from our methods while remaining hidden from our detection. Recent analysis of historical expedition data, viewed through the lens of these new discoveries, has revealed patterns that should have been obvious years ago. Equipment failures, unexpected acoustic readings, and mysterious modifications to research gear that were previously attributed to environmental factors now appear to be evidence of systematic observation and intervention by these hidden intelligences. The creatures weren't just surviving in their isolated environment. They were thriving, learning, and actively managing their ecosystem with a level of sophistication that challenges our understanding of what intelligence can accomplish in extreme conditions. They had been studying us while we thought we were studying them. This revelation has led to a complete reassessment of the safety protocols for Antarctic research. If these creatures possess intelligence superior to our own, if they have been observing and learning from human activity for years, and if they have the capability to modify their environment on a massive scale, then every human presence in their domain represents a potential contact scenario with unpredictable consequences. The modified observation pod has continued to transmit data even after its retrieval, suggesting that the creature's modifications included some form of remote communication capability. The signals it's sending don't match any known human technology, indicating that these beings have developed their own methods of information transmission that operate on principles we don't yet understand. Translation attempts on these signals have yielded disturbing results. Pattern analysis suggests that the communications contain detailed information about human technology, exploration methods, and possibly even biological data gathered from their observations of research teams. We may be looking at intelligence reports compiled by non-human observers who have been conducting their own scientific studies of our species. The psychological impact on research teams has been profound. Knowing that every movement, every equipment, deployment, every decision is being observed and analyzed by hidden intelligences has fundamentally changed how scientists approach Antarctic research. The hunters have become the hunted, and the implications extend far beyond simple scientific curiosity. Some researchers have reported sensing presence during their work, feeling watched even when sophisticated detection equipment shows no signs of nearby activity. Others describe equipment behavior that seems to anticipate their needs, as if their tools are being remotely assisted by unseen observers who understand human intentions better than the humans themselves. The economic implications are staggering. If these creatures possess technological capabilities that exceed our own, if they have developed solutions to problems we're still struggling with, then contact with them could represent the greatest technological leap in human history, or it could represent our greatest existential threat. Military analysts who have been briefed on these discoveries are asking different questions. If these beings have been observing human activity for years, what have they learned about our capabilities, our weaknesses, our methods of communication and coordination? What kind of strategic advantage does such intelligence provide, and what might they choose to do with that information? The interconnected nature of Antarctica's subglacial system means that these creatures have access to a network that spans the entire continent. They can move unseen beneath the ice, coordinate activities across vast distances, and potentially emerge at any point where the water system connects to the surface. The entire continent has become a potential contact zone. Recent satellite thermal imaging has detected anomalies that suggest this network may be even more extensive than previously believed. Heat signatures indicate active construction or modification projects occurring simultaneously at dozens of locations across Antarctica. These beings aren't just maintaining their existing infrastructure, they're expanding it. The expansion patterns show a level of strategic planning that suggests these creatures may be preparing for something. The new construction concentrates around areas where ice thickness is minimal, where connection to surface waters would be easiest to establish, where contact with the outside world would be most likely to occur. As we continue our investigation into these hidden depths, we're forced to confront a reality that challenges everything we thought we knew about intelligence, evolution, and humanity's place in the natural order. We are no longer the only engineers on this planet. We are no longer the only species capable of strategic planning, technological development, and systematic study of other life forms. The question that haunts every researcher involved in these discoveries is not whether contact will occur, but when, where, and under what circumstances. Because beneath Antarctica's ice, something is watching, learning, and preparing. And after millions of years of isolation, they may finally be ready to make themselves known. The evidence continues to accumulate, the technology continues to evolve, and the signs of preparation continue to multiply. What emerges from Antarctica's hidden waters may forever change not just our understanding of life on Earth, but our understanding of our own species' role in the greater web of planetary intelligence. Sometimes, the most significant discoveries are the ones that discover us first. And in Antarctica's hidden depths, that discovery process has already begun. The most recent developments have pushed our understanding into territory that even the most experienced researchers are struggling to comprehend. Just 6 weeks ago, an international team working at Lake Concordia detected something that has fundamentally altered the entire framework of this investigation. What they discovered wasn't just evidence of intelligence or engineering capability, but proof that these hidden civilizations possess knowledge that predates human understanding by millions of years. During routine water sampling operations, the team's equipment began receiving what can only be described as guided assistance. Their drilling apparatus, which had been struggling against unusual resistance, suddenly began operating with unprecedented efficiency. The drill path was being cleared from below, as if something in the water was actively facilitating human access to their domain. The water samples that emerged contained more than just the complex organic compounds we'd grown accustomed to finding. Embedded within the biological material were microscopic structures that appeared to be artificial, created rather than evolved. These weren't natural cellular components, but what looked like engineered systems designed to interface with both organic and inorganic materials. Laboratory analysis revealed that these microscopic machines were actively processing information, storing and transmitting data in ways that our technology can barely detect, let alone replicate. We were looking at biological computing systems that operated on principles we're only beginning to understand, embedded within organisms that had been developing these capabilities for eons. But the real breakthrough came when researchers realized that these biological computers were networked. Every sample from different locations across Antarctica's subglacial system contained similar structures, all apparently connected to a vast information network that spans the entire continent. These creatures hadn't just built physical infrastructure beneath the ice. They had constructed a biological internet that allows instantaneous communication across thousands of miles. The sophistication of this network became apparent when research teams began coordinating their activities across multiple sites. Changes made at one location would trigger responses at distant sites within hours, sometimes minutes. It was as if the entire ecosystem was operating as a single, integrated intelligence capable of processing information and coordinating responses on a continental scale. This revelation has forced scientists to reconsider everything they thought they understood about the nature of intelligence itself. We had been looking for individual organisms, individual minds capable of problem-solving and communication. What we found instead was something far more profound, a collective intelligence that treats the entire subglacial system as a single, living entity. The implications extend beyond biology into the realm of consciousness studies. If these creatures have developed a form of networked awareness that spans an entire continent, what does that mean for our understanding of individual versus collective consciousness? Are we dealing with thousands of separate organisms, or with a single, distributed intelligence that exists across multiple physical forms? Recent neurological studies of the organic samples have detected electrical activity patterns that mirror those found in human brain tissue, but operating at frequencies and intensities that far exceed anything seen in surface life. These biological computers aren't just storing and transmitting information, they're actively processing it, making decisions, and implementing complex strategies that require sophisticated understanding of cause and effect across vast temporal and spatial scales. The energy requirements for such a system should be prohibitive in an isolated environment, but thermal imaging has revealed that these creatures have found ways to harvest and concentrate geothermal energy with remarkable efficiency. They've essentially turned Antarctica's geological activity into a power grid that supports their continental-scale information network. The construction projects that satellite imagery has been tracking appear to be infrastructure for expanding this network. New thermal vents are being connected to existing systems, creating redundant pathways that ensure information flow continues even if individual components are damaged or disconnected. It's network engineering on a scale that rivals our global internet systems, built entirely by organisms that have never had contact with human civilization. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery has been evidence that this network extends beyond Antarctica's borders. Deep ocean monitoring stations have detected similar biological computing signatures in abyssal waters thousands of miles from Antarctica. The network isn't just continental, it's potentially global, connecting hidden ecosystems across the planet's deepest waters. This raises the possibility that what we've discovered beneath Antarctica is just one node in a worldwide system of interconnected intelligence that has been operating beneath our notice for millions of years. The implications for our understanding of planetary ecology, evolution, and the distribution of intelligence are staggering. If such a network exists, it means that Earth hosts not just one form of advanced intelligence, but potentially multiple forms operating on scales we never imagined possible. It means that human civilization has developed on a planet where we were never the only technological species, just the only one operating on the surface. The behavioral patterns observed in recent months suggest that this intelligence network has been conducting its own studies of human activity, not just locally, but globally. The coordination of responses across multiple sites indicates access to information about human operations that extends far beyond what local observation could provide. Military intelligence analysts reviewing these findings have identified what they term preparation behaviors occurring simultaneously across multiple continents. Construction activity in deep ocean trenches, modifications to existing thermal vent systems, and the deployment of what appear to be monitoring stations in areas where human deep-sea activity is most common. The timeline of these activities suggests a coordinated response to increasing human exploration of deep-water environments. As our technology has improved and our reach has extended into previously inaccessible areas, this hidden intelligence has been adapting its operations, possibly preparing for the inevitable contact that our expanding presence makes increasingly likely. The acoustic signatures that initially led researchers to these discoveries have evolved in recent months, becoming more complex and more frequent. Pattern analysis suggests that the communication system is operating at higher capacity, processing more information and coordinating more extensive activities than at any point in the recorded observation period. Some researchers theorize that the increased activity represents a form of planetary awakening, as if our intrusions into these hidden domains have triggered a response from intelligence networks that had been operating in a kind of dormant state. The modifications to human equipment, the systematic observation of our activities, and the expansion of underground infrastructure all point to a civilization that is preparing for something. The question that keeps researchers working through sleepless nights is whether this preparation represents an opportunity for unprecedented scientific collaboration or a response to what these hidden intelligences perceive as an existential threat to their millions of years of isolated development. Recent attempts at establishing communication protocols have yielded mixed results. The modified observation equipment continues to transmit signals that appear to contain structured information, but the complexity of the communication system makes translation extremely difficult. We're essentially trying to decode a language that has evolved in complete isolation for millions of years, operating on principles that may be fundamentally different from human communication. The few successful pattern matches that linguists have identified suggest that this communication system incorporates not just acoustic and electrical signals, but chemical and thermal information as well. It's a form of multidimensional communication that uses the entire environment as a medium for information exchange. What makes this even more remarkable is that the communication system appears to be adaptive, modifying its patterns in response to human attempts at interpretation. It's as if the network is learning from our efforts to understand it, possibly even guiding us towards successful translation by adjusting its own communication protocols to be more comprehensible to human observers. This adaptive behavior has led some researchers to propose that we may be witnessing the early stages of a deliberate first contact protocol developed by intelligences that have been preparing for this encounter far longer than we have. The systematic revelation of their capabilities, the gradual increase in communication attempts, and the careful management of human access to their domain all suggest a civilization that understands the importance of controlling the pace and nature of contact between radically different forms of intelligence. The psychological impact on research teams has intensified as the scope of these discoveries has become apparent. Many scientists report feeling simultaneously humbled and terrified by the realization that human civilization exists alongside intelligences that operate on scales we can barely comprehend. The knowledge that our every move has been observed and analyzed by beings whose capabilities far exceed our own has fundamentally changed how researchers approach their work. Some team members describe experiencing what they term contact dreams, vivid, nocturnal experiences that seem to involve direct communication with non-human intelligences. While these experiences can't be scientifically verified, The consistency of reported imagery and themes across multiple individuals who have had no direct communication with each other suggests that something beyond ordinary dreaming may be occurring. The dreams typically involve underwater environments illuminated by bioluminescent displays, communication through combinations of light, sound, and direct mental transmission, and the sharing of complex mathematical and scientific concepts that the dreamers report understanding during the experience but struggling to recall upon waking. Sleep studies conducted on research teams have detected unusual brainwave patterns during these episodes, electrical activity that doesn't match known sleep states, and bears some resemblance to the frequencies detected in the biological samples from Antarctica's hidden waters. The possibility that these intelligence networks possess some form of remote communication capability that can interface directly with human consciousness represents a development that extends far beyond marine biology into the realm of consciousness research. If these experiences represent genuine communication attempts, they suggest that these hidden intelligences possess understanding of human psychology and neurology that allows them to initiate contact in ways that bypass our normal sensory systems. The implications for our understanding of consciousness, communication, and the nature of intelligence itself are profound. The equipment modifications documented by research teams have become increasingly sophisticated, with recent examples showing alterations that improve human technology in ways that our engineers are still trying to understand. These improvements aren't random upgrades, but appear to be specifically designed to enhance human ability to perceive and interact with the hidden ecosystem. Modified sensors show increased sensitivity to the specific frequencies used by the biological communication network. Improved power systems allow equipment to operate longer in the extreme conditions of the subglacial environment. Enhanced data storage systems seem designed to record types of information that human technology wasn't originally designed to detect. The pattern suggests that these intelligences are actively assisting human research efforts, possibly because they recognize that successful communication requires both sides to possess compatible technology. They may be upgrading our equipment because they understand that meaningful contact depends on our ability to perceive and process forms of information that are completely outside human experience. This cooperative behavior stands in stark contrast to the defensive responses documented in earlier encounters. The shift from concealment and equipment sabotage to active assistance suggests that these intelligences have made a decision about how to proceed with contact, and that decision appears to favor communication over continued isolation. The transformation in their approach to human presence has coincided with changes in global environmental conditions that may be affecting their hidden ecosystem. Climate change, deep-sea mining, and increasing human activity in polar regions may be making continued isolation impossible, forcing these intelligences to choose between contact and potential exposure through environmental disruption. As we stand on the threshold of what may be the most significant contact event in human history, the evidence continues to accumulate that we are not just discovering life in Antarctica's hidden waters, but that this life has been preparing for our discovery of them. The question is no longer whether contact will occur, but whether humanity is prepared for the implications of sharing our planet with intelligences that have been operating on scales we never imagined possible. The next phase of this investigation will determine not just what exists in Antarctica's hidden depths, but what role human civilization will play in a planetary intelligence network that has been developing for millions of years before our species even existed. The answers we find beneath the ice may fundamentally change our understanding of our place in the cosmos and our role in the greater community of intelligence that calls Earth home. The most recent expedition to Lake Whillans has uncovered evidence that these hidden intelligences may be experiencing something we never anticipated in an isolated ecosystem: internal conflict. Dr. Marcus Webb's team deployed advanced monitoring equipment that captured what appears to be territorial disputes between different factions within the network. suggesting that millions of years of isolation haven't eliminated competition, but rather transformed it into something far more complex. The acoustic signatures that initially seemed to represent unified communication have revealed underlying tensions. Different regions of the lake system are broadcasting conflicting signals, creating interference patterns that suggest disagreement or competition over resources, territory, or perhaps even philosophical differences about how to handle the growing human presence in their domain. What makes this particularly fascinating is that these disputes appear to be conducted through the same biological internet that connects the entire system. We're witnessing the first documented case of network-based warfare between different nodes of a collective intelligence. The sophistication of these conflicts rivals anything in human military strategy, with coordinated attacks on rival network segments, strategic isolation of competing factions, and what can only be described as information warfare conducted at the cellular level. The implications are staggering. If these creatures are capable of internal conflict, it means they possess not just intelligence and communication abilities, but the capacity for political disagreement, strategic thinking, and resource competition that we associate with advanced civilizations. They're not just a unified collective consciousness, but a complex society with competing interests and conflicting agendas. Dr. Webb's team has identified at least 3 distinct factions operating within the Lake Whillans system, each controlling different thermal vent complexes and maintaining separate communication networks that occasionally interface but more often compete for bandwidth and resources. The territorial boundaries between these factions are marked by dead zones, where the biological computing systems have been systematically destroyed, creating information shadows that prevent rival groups from accessing each other's data streams. The warfare isn't just digital. Physical evidence shows that these factions have been engaging in what can only be described as infrastructure sabotage, with constructed channels between thermal vents being deliberately blocked or rerouted to deny rivals access to energy sources. Some areas show signs of systematic destruction that appears designed to eliminate competitor access to key resources while preserving the attacker's own infrastructure. But perhaps most disturbing is evidence that these factions are actively recruiting human technology and research efforts to support their individual agendas. The equipment modifications that research teams have documented aren't random improvements, but strategic enhancements that serve the interests of whichever faction has gained access to human equipment first. Dr. Webb's team found that their modified sensors were providing information to one faction while being systematically blocked from accessing data controlled by rival groups. They had unknowingly become pawns in a conflict between intelligences that were using human research efforts as weapons against each other. The realization that their scientific objectivity had been compromised by non-human political agendas has shaken the entire research community. Analysis of the factional boundaries has revealed that the conflicts aren't random territorial disputes, but appear to center around fundamental disagreements about how to respond to human presence in their environment. One faction seems focused on continued concealment and isolation, actively working to hide evidence of their existence while studying human technology for defensive purposes. Another faction appears to favor active engagement, possibly even open contact with human researchers. This group has been responsible for most of the cooperative behaviors documented in recent months, including the equipment upgrades and the facilitated drilling operations that allowed human access to previously sealed areas of the lake system. The third faction presents the most concerning profile. Their activities suggest a more aggressive approach to the human presence, with evidence of systematic intelligence gathering about human capabilities, weaknesses, and strategic vulnerabilities. This group appears to be preparing for conflict rather than communication, stockpiling resources and expanding their network infrastructure in patterns that military analysts recognize as preparation for offensive operations. The discovery of factional warfare within these hidden civilizations has forced researchers to reconsider every interaction they've had with these intelligences. What they interpreted as consistent behavior from a unified intelligence was actually the result of competition between different groups, each trying to influence human perception and behavior to serve their own strategic goals. Recent communication attempts have become increasingly complex as research teams try to establish contact with specific factions while avoiding unwitting involvement in their conflicts. The biological internet that connects these creatures has become a battlefield where information is weaponized, access is controlled, and human researchers find themselves navigating political landscapes they barely understand. The psychological impact on expedition members has intensified as they've come to understand that their every action has political implications within the hidden ecosystem. Equipment, placement, sampling locations, and even communication attempts are interpreted by different factions as signs of human alliance or preference, potentially affecting the balance of power in conflicts that have been developing for millennia. Some researchers report feeling manipulated by intelligences that understand human psychology well enough to influence decision-making through subtle environmental modifications, temperature changes that encourage researchers to work in certain areas, acoustic signatures that create emotional responses favoring particular choices, and equipment behaviors that guide human attention toward information that serves specific factional interests. Dr. Webb's expedition documented the first direct evidence of what researchers term human recruitment activities. One faction has been systematically modifying research equipment to create dependency relationships, making human operations more efficient while simultaneously gathering detailed intelligence about human capabilities and intentions. The modified equipment doesn't just work better, it provides these intelligences with direct access to human communication systems, research data, and operational planning. Research teams have unknowingly been broadcasting their activities, discoveries, and strategic discussions directly to intelligence networks that are using this information to advance their own political agendas. The scope of this information gathering has become apparent as researchers have traced the network modifications made to their equipment. The biological computing systems embedded in their tools aren't just recording local environmental data, they're accessing global communication networks, satellite systems, and internet infrastructure that connects Antarctic research to the broader human civilization. This means that these hidden intelligences possess detailed knowledge not just about Antarctic research operations, but about human civilization as a whole. They have access to our scientific databases, our communication systems, and our strategic planning processes. They know more about human capabilities and intentions than most human governments know about each other. The factional conflicts have intensified as different groups compete to exploit this intelligence advantage. The faction favoring engagement uses human data to identify opportunities for beneficial contact and cooperation. The defensive faction uses the same information to develop strategies for maintaining isolation and concealment. The aggressive faction appears to be using human intelligence to identify vulnerabilities and develop capabilities for potential conflict. Military intelligence analysts who have been briefed on these discoveries are grappling with implications that extend far beyond scientific research. If these intelligences possess comprehensive knowledge about human civilization while remaining largely invisible to human detection, they represent a strategic capability that could fundamentally alter global power balances. The networking capabilities that connect Antarctic operations to global human infrastructure mean that these intelligences potentially have access to sensitive military, economic, and political information from every nation involved in polar research. The intelligence advantage they possess could make them the most informed actors on the planet regarding human capabilities and intentions. Recent cybersecurity audits of Antarctic research networks have detected anomalies that suggest ongoing information extraction activities. Data flows that don't match known research protocols, communication patterns that indicate unauthorized access to classified systems, and network modifications that appear designed to maintain persistent access to human information systems. The realization that these intelligences have been conducting comprehensive intelligence operations against human civilization while remaining undetected has triggered emergency security reviews across multiple government agencies. The scope of their access to human systems may represent the most significant intelligence breach in human history, conducted by actors whose capabilities and intentions remain largely unknown. But the most unsettling discovery has been evidence that the factional conflicts within these hidden civilizations may be expanding beyond Antarctica. Deep ocean monitoring stations have detected similar territorial disputes in abyssal regions, thousands of miles from polar waters, suggesting that the political instability within these intelligence networks is spreading across global ocean systems. The interconnected nature of these biological networks means that conflicts originating in Antarctic waters can propagate across the entire planetary system, potentially destabilizing intelligence networks that have maintained equilibrium for millions of years. Human presence in these environments may have triggered a cascade of political and territorial disputes that could reshape the entire hidden ecosystem. Satellite thermal imaging has detected increased construction activity at multiple oceanic locations, with different regions showing infrastructure patterns that match the factional territories identified in Antarctic waters. It appears that the conflict between different approaches to human contact is playing out on a global scale, with each faction establishing strongholds and expanding their influence across the planet's hidden water systems. The expansion of these conflicts into international waters raises questions about sovereignty, territorial rights, and the legal status of intelligence networks that predate human civilization by millions of years. If these creatures possess legitimate claims to oceanic territories based on millions of years of occupation and development, human maritime law may be completely inadequate to address the legal implications of contact. Economic analysts studying these developments have identified potential implications that could affect global resource extraction, shipping routes, and oceanic development projects. If these intelligence networks assert territorial control over the areas they've developed, vast regions of the ocean could become off-limits to human activity, fundamentally altering international trade and resource access. The factional nature of these intelligences also creates opportunities for different human nations or organizations to align with different factions, potentially creating proxy conflicts where human interests become entangled with non-human political agendas. The intelligence advantages possessed by these creatures could make alliance with them strategically valuable, while simultaneously creating dependencies that could be exploited. As research teams continue to navigate the complex political landscape of these hidden civilizations, they're discovering that first contact isn't just a matter of communication between species, but of choosing sides in conflicts that were already underway before humans ever discovered these intelligence networks existed. The equipment modifications that initially seemed like technological gifts are now understood to be recruitment tools, ways for different factions to establish relationships with human researchers and gain access to human capabilities that could provide advantages in their ongoing conflicts. Every research decision, every equipment deployment, every communication attempt has become a political act with implications that extend far beyond scientific discovery. The next phase of research will require unprecedented cooperation between scientific, military, and diplomatic personnel as humanity attempts to navigate contact with intelligence networks whose political complexities rival our own, while possessing capabilities that far exceed current human technology. The challenge isn't just understanding what exists in these hidden waters, but determining humanity's role in conflicts that have been developing for millions of years before our species existed. The answers we seek beneath Antarctica's ice may determine not just our understanding of intelligence in extreme environments, but our species' position in a planetary political system where we are neither the most advanced nor the most informed participants. As these hidden civilizations emerge from isolation, humanity faces the challenge of engaging with intelligences whose conflicts may determine the future of our planet's oceans and our own civilization's access to the resources they contain. The implications continue to unfold as each new discovery reveals additional layers of complexity in what may be the most significant political and technological challenge humanity has ever encountered. The question is no longer just what lives beneath Antarctica's ice, but whether humanity can successfully navigate the political landscape of a planet where we were never the only advanced civilization, just the only one visible on the surface. As we surface from our journey into Antarctica's hidden depths, we find ourselves forever changed by what we've discovered lurking beneath the ice. The evidence points to something that challenges our most fundamental assumptions about life, intelligence, and our place on this planet. These aren't just prehistoric survivors or evolutionary anomalies. We may be looking at advanced civilizations that have been watching, learning, and preparing while humanity remained blissfully unaware of their existence. The question isn't whether these creatures are real, but what happens next as the boundaries between their hidden world and ours continue to blur. Sweet dreams, and remember, sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries are the ones that have been discovering us all along.